Hey gang, we're in Rhode Island today in Pawtucket, Rhode Island, and I'm with Tommy the Cat, one of our faithful viewers, subscribers. And Tommy has come up with some great stories in the past, the vampires. You'll have to check that out, put the link in. But we're here today to talk about the murder of a young 17-year-old woman way back in 1947. In fact, it happened just 2 weeks after the Black Dahlia murder out in California. And that's probably why they referred to this as the Black Dahlia of the East. It's a pretty horrific story. We're going to take a walk. We are at the location where the murder probably happened, well, in this area of the Slater Memorial Park. And Tommy has found the location, the actual location of where she lost her life. And there's a pretty horrific sign that's still there in a tree. So let's go take a look. And we'll tell the story as we walk with Tommy.
Yeah.
All right, so I'll start the story off, just a little background on Rita Bouchard was her name. She was 17 years old.
Yeah.
She lived in this area, of course, and she had worked at this company called the Rhode Island Fabric Company. And she worked the late shift there. Now, her father had died several years before.
Yep.
Her mother, of tuberculosis. Her mother had tuberculosis.
Yeah.
And she was dying, so her and her brothers and sisters were wards of the state. They would eventually, I think, live with their aunt and uncle, but at this time, when this happened, no, they must have been with them at the time.
They were living with the aunt and uncle, yep.
So living, you know, and not a lot of money to go around. Everyone's working hard. And then one day she's at work, and she worked the late shift from 3 p.m. I think till 11 p.m. And before she went to work, or sometime before, I think she said she was having bad premonitions or something.
She had told her mother that she just had a bad feeling, and she was afraid of a guy that she didn't name.
Right.
With a lady tattooed on his forearm.
Oh, that was the clue.
Yeah, and that came right from her mother, and that's all we know.
So her mother, while she was still alive,
yeah,
of course there would be a police investigation for this horrific crime, because what would happen is she was at work, and she said, "I'm not feeling well," and in the early afternoon she left. And that's where the story kind of gets weird, because the next thing you know, the aunt and uncle and mom, they see on the news that, you know, because she didn't come home, and I think it was the next day.
It was the next day.
Somebody in the woods right here, we're going to go to the spot, found her body, and she was pretty well mutilated. Well, she was stabbed up really, really bad. Now we got to watch for this trail. I think it's just up ahead here.
Yep.
And what we're going to do is we're going to take a trail off this trail way into the woods to the murder scene. She had over 30 stab wounds?
30 stab wounds, and her throat was cut.
Slit ear to ear.
Yes.
Kind of like the Joker.
Yep.
Or that's probably why that was the Black Dahlia. That's what happened, right?
That's what happened. Elizabeth Short was from Boston too, so, you know, they kind of
you go first, Tommy.
Yeah, sure.
Tommy's braver than me.
Why not?
So I'm going to send him in as the Sherpa. Actually, I'm sending him in because I want you all to see my logo for the next 10 minutes.
Yeah. It's just smart branding.
So she's got some 30 stab wounds, and what was weird is the coat that she had a blueprint dress on. She had a coat, you know, this was February, and they found only 3 stab wounds in the coat, but all the stab wounds, and the medical examiner or the coroner said it looked like it was done by a stiletto. And they really, you know, they were trying to figure out who did it, of course, and they were just becoming stymied. And there was some weird guy, among others, that they had interviewed. What was his name? Raymond
Patnode.
Patnode. Raymond Patnode. And Raymond Patnode, he had some challenges. How old was Raymond? Do you remember?
Wasn't he in high school with her?
Yeah, he was. Yeah. He was like a slight 90-pound.
He was a small,
puny guy.
Yeah.
And he knew her. He actually, I think he worked at the fabrics company too.
Yes.
Okay, he did. And this guy was really strange, guys. This guy, let me tell you, first of all, his dad would say that he would take taxi cab rides. He'd spend all his money and just ride around in the taxi cab all day. And they said when the full moon came out or the moon approached, he'd get like really aggressive and weird. And then he was busted. Wasn't he busted for sexually assaulting some boy?
That was his prior record. Carnal relations with
knowledge.
Carnal, yeah, something like that. Carnal relations with a young boy.
That's nice. We're gonna take a little turn here in the trail. Looks like Tommy knows the way. So they get him in. Actually, they didn't get him in. They had picked him up for something else. And they're like, oh, this guy's suspicious. And they spent 72 hours just grilling him. And finally he said, okay, I will, quote unquote, tell you a story. And he told this really, really weird story on what happened, and that he was somewhat of a participant to her murder in the end. Now you wonder if it's police, you know, how the police were. I don't know that they tortured him, but you know, 72 hours, probably no food or drink. People start buckling, making up stories, and this guy had some issues. But the story he told was that he saw her at the, wasn't it the movie theater? He saw her at the movie theater.
Yes.
It was like, but he was there for like 4 hours or something.
Yeah, he would go to the movie theater and
just sit there.
Sit there for hours and I guess watching whatever was on. You know, he was weird.
Yeah.
You know, but...
And then at 4 o'clock or somewhere around there, and maybe it was a little later, all of a sudden Rita shows up, and this is his story. It's like, oh, and then she sat down next to me. So we got a lot of bugs here. Hold on. Okay. She sat down next to me and we talked, and then we left. And then this is really what was weird too, is he said that there was some guy that came up in a car, something about a yellow license plate. They got in the car. He was in the back seat. This was maybe her boyfriend. And they ended up coming here to the, well, not here, but to the Slater Park. There's some Lover's Lane area.
Yep.
And then he's like, if I get the story right, he's like, I don't like this, I want to go home. So they're like, they take him back to the theater, and then he sees her goodbye, hey, see you later, and he overhears them. This is what he says. The guy's saying, you want to go home, Rita, or you want to go back to the park? She's like, let's go back to the park. And this is really where it gets weird. What happens next? He wakes up.
He wakes up next to her, you know, stabbed up, bloody corpse.
Right here.
Right in this spot, right by this tree.
Right by this tree. Now, this is what is crazy. There are hatchet marks in this tree, and it is said that, and I think it's fact, that this was here when the murder took place.
Well, these
and
marks,
you can see these have not been done other than somebody did something here.
Yeah.
But this,
and then
so 75 years, and the way this has grown over, you know, I could actually believe it, because funny story, I used to build tree houses, and we'd make steps in Niles, Illinois. We'd make steps in the tree, and this is back in, gosh, this was the mid-60s. And when I went back a few years ago, it looked just like that. Now we're talking 1947. So the Black Dahlia was January 15th, 47. Yeah. And this happened February 1st, I believe.
February 1st, yeah.
So look at that, the hatchet marks. So the thing that really strikes me about this, you know, we've got this hatchet marks going on, and where did the hatchet marks come from? It just seems like, okay, so you had whoever killed her, he used a knife, and then did he pull out of his pants a hatchet and go, I'm gonna just like chop this tree up, you know, just to make my mark, which to chop all that away is gonna take at least 20 minutes, right? And how much noise is that going to make? So I have a feeling somebody put this here to maybe mark the location. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, they said, you know, according to the police report, you know, I guess the slash marks were made during the frenzied attack, but can a stiletto really make those kind of marks?
And who was carrying a hatchet, right? An axe.
In the woods, you never know. But
pretty strange.
Yeah, I mean, we don't know. I mean, it could be. Her family certainly thinks.
Well, we don't know. You know, while all this was, after this interrogation, he's telling these stories, they found a stiletto, actually an 8.5-inch blade, up the trail here. An 8-year-old boy found it, and it was covered in blood. So they identified that as the murder weapon.
Through those 3 holes in her jacket. Yeah,
and getting to the weirdest part of the story in the interrogation, back to Raymond, he says after all of the movie and bye-bye, he says, I went to the park, why we would go to the park, and I went to see where she was, and she was on a bench and she was crying. So I went up, I sat down, I said, what's wrong? And she like slapped me in the face and she ran away. So I caught up with her and I said, what's wrong? And she slapped me again. And then she kicked me in the groin twice. Like, okay. And then the next thing I remember, I woke up next to her body right here. And this is, he goes, the quote was, and I don't like dead bodies, so I left. And this was 2 weeks later, right?
2 weeks later.
Like his recollection.
Yeah, his recollection came back to him.
Who knows? Concocted story. This guy was a wacko. He ended up going into the, they ended up committing him, I believe, to one of the institutions here.
Yeah.
And
yeah, they did.
They were doing testing. It was the Charles V. Chapin Hospital in Providence.
Yeah. And
they determined that he was a clinical moron, quote unquote, and defective delinquent. So you talk about, and the terms back then, they used morons, they used the word idiots, feeble-minded. That's my favorite.
Yep.
I mean, sorry, but it's, you know, you have to wonder 100 or 200 years from now, are they going to look mentally challenged, or what's the term we use now?
I don't even know anymore.
Yeah, but they're going to look at that and they're going to go, can you believe they call people mentally challenged? Oh my God. Anyway.
How insulting.
Yeah, how horrible. But so the case kind of ended there. They let him go because they just thought he's a nutcase. And they, you know, this is, and they, here's the cool thing. They just reopened the case 2 years ago, I believe.
2018.
Oh, 4 years ago. Yeah. So they opened the case up and they're trying to find out who did it. The guy's probably dead. But I got to tell you, after, you know, we've talked and researching the story, I don't think that, I think this guy was a whack job. And I think it was there was probably, she was dating some guys, right?
That's the rumor. That's what they're saying.
Yeah. And I think there was a quote that she mentioned, I'm afraid of this guy. So it wouldn't have probably been Raymond because she wasn't dating him. And the last I heard is there's some talk of some kind of address book, or like she had a book.
Yeah.
And why the police wouldn't have looked at that back then?
They seem to have kind of botched the whole thing, really. You know, people were walking all over the crime scene. Yep. You know, they didn't tape anything off back then. You know, it was flawed from the beginning.
Right.
You know, they just, I mean, you know, he said he woke up here 8 hours later, completely blacked out, and
it just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, none of it makes sense. I mean, he was sleep deprived for 3 days. You know, who knows what was going through his brain at that point.
Right.
You know, so I don't think he did it. You know, the kid was 90 pounds soaking wet.
Right.
They said, you know, so she certainly wasn't dragged here by him from another location.
Boy, I would love to see the address book and what's in there. And maybe that's where the investigation is going right now. I don't know.
I mean, what else could they have?
Right.
I mean, we got DNA, but, you know.
You never know. The DNA could come. Well, they'd have to have the knife.
They have the knife.
Yeah, you've got the knife, you've got the blood. Now that would be her blood, but a lot of times the killer's hand gets cut,
yeah,
and their blood ends up on it. It would, so that would be the path. Now it's been 4 years. Gosh, I wonder. We've got all this very advanced DNA techniques. Maybe they could figure it out. But again, the address book, the phone numbers. I got to believe the police have all that evidence. They reopened it, so. I guess calling out to the police. What's the update? Anybody know out there? That's watching, put it in comments, let us know. The sad deal is that her parents, of course, both dead, living with the aunt and uncle.
Yes. And
the aunt and uncle were evicted, and I don't know, everybody got split up. I don't know what happened, but it was a really sad ending. We're going to go to the cemetery right now. I am. Tommy's got some things he's got to do. And we will, thanks Tommy for bringing us out here.
Oh, no problem, it was my pleasure.
All right, so let's head to the cemetery.
Yeah.
All right, gang, we are in Pawtucket right now, Rhode Island. We're at the cemetery, St. Francis Catholic Cemetery. And the grave for Rita was really, really hard to find. I spent about an hour and a half. I believe it is unmarked. And I got to give a huge shout out to Joe, who is on the ground crew here and now a subscriber. Thanks, Joe. And Ralph basically runs the cemetery, and he looked it up in the book. I'm going to show you right now the entry. We did verify that it is section 59 and lot 387, which is really, it's kind of a lot number, grave number system. Every number is different, and we did, you know, take the shovels out and verify. Let's go take a look. I've already put a rose to mark the spot for Rita, and I'm kind of surprised that there's no gravestone for her. Now it may be, I know that I saw her niece and nephew on the news. By the way, let me just pan over to Joe, just so I really want to give credit where credit is due. And there he is. Let's see if he'll give us a wave. He does, he gives the wave. That's our man Joe. And her grave is right over here. And what I was saying is, I'm surprised, but it may be that the family does not want it marked, does not want her grave marked. And I kind of feel like, well, I kind of feel like I'm going to take the rose away because I want to respect the family, and I don't want people coming here after the episode and looking for the rose. But I mean, it is section 59. You can look on. You know what, I'm just going to leave the rose, because I mean, people can look it up and find it. But if her niece and nephew are watching, you know, one, we're going to get the word out here. Anybody who knows anything, I'll put the info below. Crime Stoppers, call the police, Pawtucket. And I'm here, we are here to provide a stone for Rita if the family wishes. We will pay for everything. So this is kind of a reach out to her niece and nephew. We would love to help, but I totally understand and respect your feelings if Rita needs to be remained unmarked and no questions asked. So that's going to do it. Rest in peace. And hopefully, again, this thing is not solved, and we're all trying to get the word out here. And if you know anything, please contact police. And may Rita Bouchard rest in peace.